You're listening to the podcast for all of the news, notes, and breakdowns for your Ohio State Buckeyes. This is Sons of the Shoe with Nick Wilson and Spencer German.
So everybody tells me I'm too hyperbolic. They tell me when I put the Michigan panic meter in the gray that I'm the crazy one and that there's nothing to worry about. And then I'm just a worrywart, and I'm just a scared fan or whatever, and I'm living in my fears. And then all those things come to fruition. So, Jake, you were laughing to the bank that I had it in the light gray, that I was at least a little bit worried because of the mental factor here for Ryan Day. Others have done the same. Nick did the same. I can tell you right now, Nick Wilson, the former co-host of this show with me, there's no way even he can spin this one because he was Ryan Day's biggest champion. He was the last standing person who was not willing to fire him. And I saw even he tweeted that now you can fire Ryan Day. So even he has come around to the idea that this was the end of the line for Ryan Day. I was kind of there after the Oregon game because I said at some point you got to win the big games in those spots. I don't care what the context is. I don't care about any of that. And we all knew that this season was about one thing and one thing only. Maybe not one thing only, because there's bigger goals for this team. But the main thing on your list was to beat Michigan. You ran it back. All these guys who came back to this team, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, who goes without a pair of gold pants to wear, Travion Henderson, all the guys that came back, all of it was for nothing. It was for nothing because you lost to the team. You put $20 million, a reported $20 million of NIL money goes into the building this roster, and you come away with another loss to Michigan in the most embarrassing fashion. And Jake, this is the worst one. Of the last 4 years, this is easily the worst one. It has to be, because the other years it was like, okay, you could explain it. Jim Harbaugh is a hell of a coach. It took him a long time, but he finally built a team that could beat Ohio State. And Ryan Day, maybe, there was the whole born on third baseline. And, maybe there was a little bit of like newness there, and he didn't really he had to kind of earn his stripes. And so it was like, okay, one loss was one thing. 2 losses, it was like, okay, maybe he's starting to get the better of them. 3 losses, it was already inexcusable enough. And now a 4th loss to this Michigan team that scored 13 points in the game and that couldn't throw the football. They had they threw the football for the entirety of this game for under 100 yards. They had 62 yards passing and 172 yards rushing. They could do absolutely nothing. You knew what the game plan was going to be from them because their defense was their foundation, was their backbone. That team was awful. They were 6-5 coming into this game, and you still found a way to lose. What the hell? That's why this is the worst one, because the consensus was you were going to beat this team and that you should beat this team and that it was going to be no contest. And even though it was 10-10 for most of that game, I was like, at some point they're going to pull away. I didn't believe they were going to lose until that last drive. I was like, this is it. This is the end. They're going to lose. And I was at the game. This was so like part of the reason why I went to this game. My wife and I, we had a nice little night away from our 2.5-year-old. We're trying to just have a nice little couple days to ourselves to enjoy something fun like the Ohio State game. Part of the reason we picked it was because we felt this was the year they were finally going to get the job done. Nope. They come up short again, and here we are talking about another loss to Michigan in the most embarrassing fashion possible. A lot of stuff to break down. I apologize for going on such a soliloquy here. Jake hasn't even had a chance to talk, so I apologize, Jake. But I will concede the floor to you now as I try to catch my breath.
I mean this in the kindest, most supportive way ever. Did you get it all out? Did you get it? Are we good?
No, because I'm going to have a lot more rants to go on. And only like 30 minutes to do it. So that was rant number 1. Let's see what I got left in the tank for rant number 2. No, go ahead.
Yeah, if we put together my talk time today, I might get like 3 minutes. Here we go. So first off, addressing the panic meter, this is a game that Ohio State, it wasn't even that Michigan won this game. Like the game was ugly and disgusting from the start. Ohio State ran the ball quite literally, like they ran themselves out of the game. It was downright awful. You're 100% right. This is the end of the road for Ryan Day. I mean, I think I tweeted anything other than a national championship and Ryan Day is
well,
no
yeah,
longer
that's
gonna
the
be at Ohio
key
State.
thing. That's the key thing. Because I got home from the trip. That was part of the reason why we're doing the show a little bit later than usual, guys, because I was driving back from Columbus. But I got home and like I was talking to my mother-in-law who was watching our son, like I said, and she's like, "That's it. He needs to be fired tomorrow." And I was like, "Well." I was like, they're not going to fire him middle of the season when
Obviously
they're
not,
still going to
right.
make the playoff. Like, that's just not something that a team would do. But yeah, like his job security pretty much hinges on what they do in the playoff. Maybe if they get to the championship, there's a case. If they if they win the championship, I think he keeps his job. But anything short of like getting to that game, I think that's it. Like there's just there's no way around it. Like you can't hide from this boogeyman anymore. I tried for years to make the excuses for Ryan Day, and I do understand. Like I just had a conversation with the great Tom Withers of the AP the other day out covering the Browns, who's obviously an Ohio State guy. Like there's a lot of context as to why Ryan Day has not won those games. The big game against Georgia, the year they lost, the first year they lost to Michigan. It was like, okay, you lose Marvin Harrison Jr. and you lose by a field goal. Like you almost pulled that one off, and you probably win a national championship. There's always something, and I could give them that for a while. But then they lost to Oregon this year, and it was like, at some point you just got to win them. At some point you have to win those games, and I can't keep making excuses for you. And so this year, then he beats Penn State, then he beats Indiana. I know people weren't giving him credit for Indiana, but now, again, if the only thing keeping Ryan Day from losing his job was that he beats the teams he's supposed to beat, that when they're not ranked teams like top 5 teams, well, that goes out the window today, and it goes out the window in the worst fashion because it was against Michigan, who is your biggest rival. So not only are you supposed to beat him anyway because it's your biggest rival, you're also supposed to beat them when they're not a ranked team and they're 6-5 coming into your house, and you still lost the game. I mean, there's no other excuses you can make at this point for Ryan Day. Like I said, if he wins a national championship, I'm sure they're not going to fire him. That's the one saving grace he's got. But anything short of that, yeah, like I don't know what else you can do at this point because you've changed everything else. You brought in Chip Kelly. You brought in Jim Knowles. You kept your team intact. You did what Michigan did last year. You brought everybody back, and they were like, national title run, here we come. And you still fell short in that game.
Yeah, I think, and I was one of the people too who was like, I sort of laid on the table with Michigan. It was like, these are not the Urban Meyer Michigan wins, right? The losses that Ryan Day had picked up. It was legitimate national title contenders for Michigan in those years that he lost the last 3 years. This was the year, it was like the get right year, right? They're not great at all. They're playing a quarterback that they didn't think they were going to go into the year with. They didn't want to go into the year with. And it was like, you walk away with this game, as long as you get a win, but you should probably take this one handedly, and you lose it. I was unsubscribed from the idea of Michigan was in Ryan Day's head and he couldn't get over the mental hump, and this swings you in the complete opposite direction. There's no other way to go than when I watched this game that Ryan Day and the entire coaching staff, at least on the offensive side of the ball, was infected with that mentality. Michigan was not the hump that you could get over. It's absolutely inexcusable. This is a game you could not walk away from as a loser in the worst way, right? If you would have somehow gotten into a battle where the defense fell apart, I think we all would have looked around and been utterly confused. This was the script for Michigan the whole way. It was make the defense stand there, do their thing, and then hopefully that turns into some easy points on offense. And that's what it did. Ohio State played right into the trap of Michigan. They wanted to go in, prove that they were the tougher, bigger team, and they would win in the trenches, and they didn't even come close to it. They got completely away from their game and how they win, and played right into Michigan's hand.
Well, and that's one of the most disappointing parts about this game is like the way you were going to beat them was with the wide receivers that you had, the guys that you spent the $20 million reportedly on to build this roster, the top flight recruits you got on the outside of this of your offense, and you didn't utilize them. Like the one drive that they scored a touchdown on, it was all passes down the field, hurry up offense, and you scored in a hurry and you tied the game up to take it to halftime. And I'm not saying you felt great about things in that moment, because it was only 10-10 and you felt like this offense should have scored more. But you were at least satisfied with the fact that, like, okay, we evened this game up in an ugly sort of game that we didn't play a very good first half. Fine. You can live with that. And then it just went completely away from it. I texted you this earlier, Jake, but like this game to me, and nothing epitomized more this Michigan team being in Ryan Day's head more than the game plan that this Ohio State team trotted out there today. And you want to know why? Because all you hear about is if you're going to win the Michigan-Ohio State game, you got to run the football. You got to win in the trenches. And I know there's the stat. They probably flashed it up on the TV during the broadcast that I couldn't see. The last 22 years, last 22 years of the rivalry, the team that won the run battle won the game. Great. Okay. Well, guess what? That was never what Ohio State did well. This offensive line has been a problem this year. Just when you thought they were on the uniform, Josh Simmons gets hurt. Then they start to feel better with Carson Hinsman at guard and Jackson and Donovan Jackson out at left tackle, and Seth McLaughlin's playing so well. Well, now he gets hurt. And so you knew this was a weakness for this team. And you like you said, you played right into Michigan's hands because I'm telling you, it felt like Ryan Day just was so in his head that he was like, we are going to run the football at all costs. Everybody in the stadium, we were like the people I was sitting with, we were joking every time. First down, they're going to run the football. They would run it every time on first down. And then even when they were in like 2nd and 7, they would run it again. Like they had no identity. They tried to make the run game their identity. It just felt like Ryan Day was trying to prove a point. Like, my team is tough. And I've talked about this before. I talked about this with Nick last year before you obviously were on this show with us, Jake. Like this, he is so obsessed with proving to people that his team is tough. It's why he goes on the Lou Holtz rant after that Notre Dame game. And I thought that was funny in the moment. I laughed about it. It was whatever. But he kept talking about like, we're a tough team. We're a tough team. This was him trying to prove we're a tough team. We can beat this Michigan team. We can run the football on them, which is what they've done against us the last 3 years. And he failed at it miserably. And then when it wasn't working, he didn't go away from it. They just kept on doing the same damn thing over and over again. It was Einstein's definition of insanity. It made absolutely no sense. He coached scared yet again. I understand they weren't going to go for like 4th and 2 or whatever it was, like deep in Michigan or deep in their own territory late in the game. But there was a couple other 4th downs early where they settled for field goals. It was like 4th and 5 and 4th and 7. Maybe those are a little bit longer. I get it. But like Ohio State coming into this game was top 10 in 4th down conversions this year. Like they're one of the best teams at converting 4th downs this year. How the hell did you not try to go for it once and you just settled for field goals when your kicker can't hit the broadside of a barn? Like it was another example of Ryan Day coaching scared, Ryan Day trying to prove to himself and everybody else, we can beat this team by being more physical, and you failed again. And that's maybe the most mind-boggling thing about all this, Jake, as I go on yet another rant here, is just like the blueprint has been there the last 3 years. You have seen how they have beaten you. They beat you in the trenches every single year. It's the same thing. We're having the same damn conversation on this podcast, on 92.3 The Fan, on 97.1 in Columbus, which I was listening to on the way out of town, driving back up home after this game. Like, everybody says the same thing. It's they beat you in the trenches. They beat you in the trenches. They're more physical. You're a finesse team. And they never resolve the issues. They still miss out on the top lineman recruits because for whatever reason, Justin Fry and Ryan Day are buddies and they get to go out and have drinks together. And, oh, I'm glad I helped you get a job, man. Well, guess what? He stinks. He's never developed good offensive linemen. And he misses on all the big name recruits. Like, it's a disaster. The thing that they have been good, the thing that they've gotten beat at, they've never tried to correct. How can you be 4 years into this thing and not be trying to correct the thing that everybody's pointed out as the problem when you play that team? It doesn't make any damn sense.
No, and I mean, routed through it in our chat. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but if I'm not, it was a couple minutes ago. But like, this is a finesse team, which you just brought it up too. Like, I get that we hate that, and it's a terrible thing. And you can go back to it. We don't recruit good enough linemen. This team's not tough enough, whatever. But going into this year and with the injuries that you've gotten, yes, in some sense, like you are a finesse team, and it doesn't necessarily like mean a bad thing. Like this team ran the football semi-effectively against like worse defensive lines. You, again, just went straight away from it. You wanted to run the ball so damn bad. Why? Why was it so ingrained in your head that that's what you had to do? Like, again, the stat is one thing, but you just did not want to go for it. I think the Caleb Downs interception drive, when you got the interception, you were deep into Michigan territory, and you flipped around, was the exact epitome of that. First down, run the ball. Second down, you try some gimmicky little crossing route to get G. Scott on the other side. Doesn't go for anything. It's like a no gain. It's basically 3rd and 10. And you call up A draw play.
A running back draw play. I'm
That is
glad
not what this team is good at.
I'm glad you brought that up. We are exactly on the same wavelength with this. This was going to be the next point I actually brought up if you didn't bring it up. So I'm glad you did, because I thought that drive really did symbolize that game in a nutshell. And that was, again, coaching scared. It was coaching scared. You just got a turnover and you're running a draw play on 3rd and 9. Like, what were you trying to prove there? Like, were you scared that Will Howard was going to throw another pick? Because I was scared that the kicker wasn't going to make the field goal that he missed earlier in the game. Like, again, you're 100% right. That drive to me summed up this game entirely, and you spoiled what was supposed to be like a celebratory day. Defense played out of its mind good. And you and I were sort of texting about like the Jack Sawyer interception in the end zone that halted the Michigan drive that felt like it could have been the end of the game.
Right.
Like, that play was, first of all, it was a really good design by just Jim Knowles in general, because it was basically Jack Sawyer sort of on like a delayed drop in coverage, and Davis Warren had his man wide open, and because he didn't see Sawyer drop, I think he thought like, oh, I can just kind of zip this in here, and he kept the ball low, and he had so much field if he just lobbed it up there. And he made a mistake because of it, and then he picks it off, and it was like, that was honestly the moment I was like, okay, that's it. They're gonna they played with their food this entire game, and now they're gonna march down the field and score a game-winning touchdown or whatever. And then you get the Carnell Tate drop on 2nd down, which was just a brutal one on the ensuing series. But like, again, it's mind-boggling, man. You spoiled such a great performance from this defense. That like they kept you in that game the entire time. That all year I've been saying that's a national championship level defense. And it just stinks that the offense didn't rise to the occasion in the most important game of the season.
Like, where was this is the other thing that it goes into the same point, but like Jeremiah Smith, right? He's one of the top wide receivers in the country. He's up for the best award over there. Like, how do you not get him more involved in the game? The 3 times you threw him the ball in the end zone, it was 2 pass interferences and a touchdown.
Yeah.
How do you not?
They didn't take any deep shots. And also, like, late in the game, like, you might as well just like throw it up to him and see what you can do. Because,
Spencer, this Michigan team didn't have Will Johnson.
Right. They didn't have their best, one of their best defensive players and their best corner by far.
The secondary was as weak as you could have possibly asked for it. And you said, we're going to go run the ball against a top 5 D line in the country. When you know your offensive line is not,
and all Michigan did, by the way, on defense, like the entire game, I was like standing / sitting there watching. They just played zone the entire game, and it didn't seem like they were running routes to like get guys open over the middle of the field. I understand the line struggled today, and so there was some pressure on Will Howard, but it all just goes back to like, you didn't do enough to, like, we talked so much about Chip Kelly being a master at like, yeah, we know the offensive line's a little bit weak in some spots. How can we scheme to get Judkins in space or Henderson in space and make some things kind of happen? Today, they didn't do any, like, it felt like there was no scheming involved. It was like, we know we have these great receivers. Who needs them? It's the Michigan game. No. And again, it just goes back to, I don't know what they were trying to prove. I have no idea what they were trying to prove other than Ryan Day being in his head and basically feeling like he has to show everybody that he can beat Michigan the way that Michigan beat him. And what did it get you? A 4 straight loss to this team. And that is why, I don't know if we've actually said the words fired on this podcast yet. I know we kind of said like, well, the only way he saves his job, but no, like, listen, this has to be the end of the line. If, again, anything short of winning the national championship from here, which if he can rally this team to do that and go on a run and win 4 more games, I guess he deserves to keep his job if that's the case, because this felt devastating. I mean, and the players after the game, it seemed devastating. Ryan Day, I didn't catch his press conference, but I was told that like he was basically on the brink of tears. I thought Will Howard kind of a week ago with how much he was kind of talking some smack about Kurt Signetti and everything. I thought he kind of had a bad attitude in defeat here, where he's like giving like 1-word answers to stuff. And it was like, I get that it hurts, man, but like, you can't be walking around, swinging whatever, your nuts on the table when you beat Indiana, who people don't even really think was a real top 5 team. And then 1 week later, you get beat by the team that owns you. And you're just like, yeah, we didn't play well today. Like, no, like, so I don't know. Like, there's a lot to unpack there. We obviously do need to talk about what happened at the end of the game on the field. But yeah, we are obviously seeing in the comments, and I do want to give a shout out to Radu because he listens pretty much each and every single week. He's saying fire Ryan Day. There's a number of others. Running on empty says Urban would have grabbed this game by the P. I kind of missed what he said at the end there. Or I wouldn't have thrown that comment up, but hey, he got on the broadcast. That's okay. I'm trying to find some more here. It's hard to like do a show while you're also scrolling through people's comments. They lost this game on purpose. I believe that in my heart. I don't know about that, but I mean, I don't know. I know Brian Cato earlier. Yeah, he kind of alluded to what I said. You can't have your best friends coaching with you, aka Kelly and Fry. So yeah, like there's you're sensing a common theme here, and there are a few comments that I'm skipping right now because it is kind of like a very sidebar topic about a game that literally just wrapped as we were coming on the air. We will get to it, but I do think since I brought up Will Howard, maybe that's another good place to go because again, along the lines of spending $20 million in NIL to build this team, you brought in somebody like Will Howard to beat this team specifically. You brought in Will Howard to get you over the top because the quarterback that we haven't talked about yet, the elephant in the room, wasn't good enough to get you there last year, and you felt like you needed an upgrade. And then I'm not going to like him. No, I am going to toot my horn because I had said in the beginning of the season, I was like, listen, there's just something missing with I almost called him Kyle McCord.
There's something missing with him too, but
there's something missing. There's something missing with Will Howard. I kept saying it. And then the Oregon game happened, and I was like, okay, I think he proved he can win the big games. And then he kind of reverted back to that guy where I was like, something's missing. And then he played well against Indiana last week, and I was like, okay, maybe I'm back on the train again. But and even though I felt like that after last week, the theme was there that like there was kind of this roller coaster of like, yeah, I feel good about him, and then I don't feel so good about him. And he picked the worst game to turn into a pumpkin in the version of himself that I was worried about. He threw 2 interceptions today. The first one, I think, was him just trying to sort of like force a play early because you got the turnover. But like you can't
actually, I thought that play was really like a good defensive play. All in all, like it wasn't bad ball placement. It was a little forced.
I thought he threw it a little bit late. That was kind of because I was watching that play develop when I saw the break. And then I saw Will not throw it as he broke, and then he threw it a little bit late. And I was like, yeah, I mean, what are you going to do? I did think he kind of forced it, but yeah, I that's fair. You probably saw it better on TV than what I would have in the stadium because I was on the other end.
I mean, I think that's a fair analysis of it. Like, it was a little bit of a late throw, but all in all, I thought it was a good defensive play as well. Like, it was kind of one you walked away from, like, but like, you weren't going to chalk it up and be like, that's a pumpkin throw. The second interception, that was a pumpkin.
Yeah. Well, but I also say this about the first one. It would have been better in that situation because of how backed up you were. Like it just felt like he was forcing it because he wanted to like get the offense moving and because they just got the turnover. They just stopped him at the goal line. And like he forced it into a spot where he shouldn't. Like just don't throw just throw it away. Punt the ball. It's whatever, like live to fight another day. But yeah, the second one was bad. And that was that moment where it was like, what is going on here? Like, and that was right after, that was actually right before Caleb Downs got the pick to sort of turn the tide back in your favor, but it killed all your momentum. And then, like we said, the drive after the Caleb Downs interception was just putrid. So, like, again, you paid all this money for what? That's where I'm left because Will Howard was supposed to be the missing link. He was supposed to be the missing piece. The quarterback was supposed to be the problem. And today, the quarterback, there was other things, but the quarterback was one of your biggest problems today.
Yeah, I don't know. You texted me, I think, multiple times saying like, Egbuka was open on that play, or like he missed some throws. I know there was one over the middle of the field, I think on 3rd down, where he just overthrew. I think it was Carnell Tate who had to go up and try to make a play. Like, it wasn't even. I don't even know where to place the blame on that because like the run game was getting you nothing, and then you were almost forced into passing on obvious passing downs on most of the time. Like, yeah, it was a bad Will Howard game. It was a bad Chip Kelly game, a bad Ryan Day game. The entire offense was just a nothing burger. Like, there was not, like, I almost feel bad for, like, Travion Henderson and Quinshot Judkins because they were just getting pounded all day behind the line of scrimmage just trying to make something out of nothing. Like, those are the only 2 guys I semi feel bad for on that offense.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's been hard for them sort of all year to kind of get that run game going. So that's kind of been frustrating, I'm sure, as well. But man, like Will, like he let you down today. And I think one of the biggest problems with him was like you would see it in games when it was the same sort of thing we said about Kyle McCord last year. Like first reads, great. Second reads, sometimes he'd have it. And then if he had to kind of go through a play, and when Michigan was just playing zone all day, they sort of took away those quick options, and you had to sort of be able to stand in there and like read the defense. And he wasn't reading it very well today, I didn't think. And again, he missed some throws, like the pinpoint accuracy that we saw in some of those throws in the last couple weeks just wasn't there today. And it couldn't be today that eluded you, that got away from you. But again, like this game ultimately came down to the trenches. It came down to not being able to do anything with the offensive line. I said it a couple weeks ago. Seth McLaughlin's injury is the thing that probably prevents this team from winning a national championship. I thought it could have been Josh Simmons, and then they started to figure some things out. I thought that Seth McLaughlin was going to be too much to overcome. I think we saw that today, that without two of your best offensive linemen, you just weren't going to be able to run the ball. And now I understand, like, yeah, they're going to make the playoff, and we're talking about, like, big picture. I guess if they were to make a title run, maybe Ryan Day is safe. But, like, in the same vein, like, the blueprint's out there. The blueprint is out there that Will Howard can't, play zone. If you have a good defensive line, get pressure, stop the run, and Ohio State's a sitting duck. But despite how great their defense is, they're not going to be able to do anything against you. So I don't know. Like, it feels like there's no coming back from this, even with the opportunity that awaits in the playoff.
Like, I know the point you're trying to make with the offensive line, but to me, that wasn't like the thing that killed you today. Again, like everything, and I don't want to keep harping on the same point because we're trying to move past it.
But I thought it was
back.
Go ahead.
It all comes back to, like, the offensive line could have been as bad as it could have been. It was on Chip Kelly and Ryan Day to scheme something up to get away from that, to get your passing game to work outside of that, to run plays, which they did a few times. They talked about it on the broadcast. Get some guards in motion. Use athleticism on your offensive line instead of trying to run directly up the middle, just having straight up blocking going for your running backs. Because you're not going to win the straight up battle. The defensive line is more talented than your offensive line's backups. That's just flat out the case that it's been, and they didn't rely on that enough. If you're going to get something going, you have to establish the passing game first, because that's been your identity, and let the run game work off of that. They did it completely backwards today. I don't think you pin that on the offensive line. I think you pin that on quite literally backwards play calling.
Well, so here's the thing. I think the offensive line is a problem enough that it probably was going to always prevent this team from being a real national title contender. I do think it was a problem today, and we knew that, but I do think that the bigger issue, to your point, today specifically, was that a good coach knows what your weaknesses are, and they know how to sort of scheme away from those things. And so, to your point, use the pass to set up the run. They didn't do that today. They were committed to running the football for whatever boneheaded reason, and it didn't work. It backfired on you, and so you were relying on your weakness, which was your offensive line, and we've been saying that all year. I also think it falls in the lap of guys like Ryan Day and Chip Kelly and others when, again, if you know that that's your issue, you got to do a better job to bolster that issue. And I understand they did hit the transfer portal and they got Seth McLaughlin, and the year before that, they got Josh Simmons in the transfer portal. So I get they've done that a little bit. But again, I just keep going back to, for 4 years now, you know that that's been a problem for you. And if you can't run the football and that's how you want to try to beat that team, well, guess what? You got to get better offensive linemen then. And so it falls in the lap of Justin Fry. It falls in the lap of the coaches. Like, it all goes back to the same point of this falls on Ryan Day and the way that he's built his program. And it falls on Ryan Day and the way that they built their program is how you should be trying to win games. And they didn't do that today. And so here we are talking about another loss to Michigan. I did want to ask what you thought of, because we were sort of walking out as it all unfolded, and we kind of saw like a little bit of it, but we didn't see until we got home like the actual highlights of it all. What played out on the field after the game? What was kind of your overall takeaway from I think it was Jack Sawyer who kind of got in the mix there and pulled the flag off?
I'm so torn on this, because in one sense of it, it's like, I don't think you should ever stand for a team trying to wave their flag and plant it in the middle of your field. That I would like you to step up to. So part of me is like, yeah, props for that. But part of me is, you're going to play the tough guy with not to Jack Sawyer, by the way, who had a great game today. But like, as a team, you're going to play the tough guy and step in that scenario. You just had 3 hours to be the tough guy. You had 3 hours to lay it on Michigan and be the tough guy. Why did you pick after the game? Nobody had a problem with energy and making a stop right there. Or I'm sure the offensive linemen, I saw Quinshon Judkins in there. I saw everybody get mixed entirely in the mix. Where was the energy during the game? Where was that tenacity and the hatred for Michigan while you were playing and you put up 0 second half points? You had 0 first downs in the fourth quarter. Then you didn't show up. And I think Ryan Day is the worst part of that all, by the way. I don't know if you saw that.
Right before we got on, I thought I saw a clip where, like, was he just like standing there, not doing anything?
He was standing there watching his team. Somebody came jogging off from the side and he looked at me and goes, "What happened?" As in, like, why did the fight break out? As a head coach, you're not supposed to be in the center of the field commanding your team back to the locker room.
That's so awful.
Like,
oh my god,
you're just watching it play out. You were letting it happen.
To me, that's another image of why this team is just in his head. Like,
and
after the game, you're just standing there, and the video I saw, it was just like he had this glaze over his eyes, where it was like he was just staring into space, and then, like you said, he sort of says to somebody, "What happened?" Like, oh, like he got snapped out of this coma that he was in. Because he lost to Michigan yet again. He didn't understand why he got knocked out yet for the 4th straight year. That's inexcusable stuff.
After the game, by the way, like in his press conference,
I think you said it best, by the way. I don't really have anything to add. Like, you had 3 hours to take it to him, and now you're going to be like tough guy. And to be fair, like, Jack Sawyer, he played a great game. The defense played a great game. It's not that the defense wasn't. The defense was plenty tough today. It's not their fault that they lost. But you only let up 13 points, you shouldn't lose.
Yeah, in his press conference, he backed it, by the way, saying that his team basically shouldn't let somebody plant the flag in the middle of their field, and that like he went to bat for the guys for starting an all-out brawl that, from the reports, required mace on Michigan players.
Yeah, I saw that.
Police officers had to mace Michigan players during the brawl.
That's not great. No, so here's the thing. I love that Jack Sawyer did it, because obviously, being an Ohio State fan, I wouldn't want to stand for that either. And he's an Ohio guy. He clearly plays with a lot of, like, heart and spirit, and he really wanted to come back and win this game and do all that. And that's why he returned. But so I don't blame him for trying to stop it. And I free drinks in Columbus for the rest of his life for doing something like that. But at the same time, you're right. Like, they had 3 hours to try to be the more physical team and be tough guy, and they didn't do it. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a pathetic showing after, like, when you're brawling after losing a game to a team who, again, you were 20.5-point favorites, which to my knowledge is the biggest favorite in the game, to then go on and lose. And then you start an all-out brawl. Like, I saw a lot of comments that were from either, nonpartisan fans or from Michigan fans being like, that's essentially like, you're losers. You look like big losers, sore losers going into the game, and not necessarily starting the brawl, but in a way starting the brawl. Because I don't agree with, again, planting the flag. I think that's poor sportsmanship on the side of Michigan too, but you also retaliated, and we know in these senses, like, the retaliator is sort of the person who gets blamed and the one who gets looked at more negatively.
I like this comment. Jack Sawyer's 0-4 against Michigan. That is his legacy. He will carry for the rest of his life, free drinks or not. Yeah, I mean, listen, I wasn't trying to say I just said free drinks in Columbus for the rest of his life. I didn't say, like, I don't know. He's not going to get his name up in the rafters or anything. I was, I think free drinks because he took a stand against the flag being planted is a pretty worthy payment for that. No, yeah, I think the general consensus here, because we could just rant on and on about how awful the offense was today. I think we've touched on the main points, which are play con was atrocious. Ryan Day, very much on the hot. Like, again, this was the team you couldn't lose to. You could not lose to this Michigan team. And so there's no excuses left for him. So again, anything short of winning a title, which I think is very unlikely at this point because the blueprint's out there. You're not a tough team. I think he loses his job. Now, I will say, somebody threw in the chat earlier, I saw this, his buyout's like $37 million. That is an interesting element to this, because I do think more than ever, you're going to see teams hold on to their coaches because the buyouts are so massive, and because it's a 12-team playoff where so many teams are going to get opportunities every year to, like, make it. So I do think that's interesting. But the difference is, in Ryan Day's instance, like, we're not talking about, like, Tennessee or one of these teams that's, like, always kind of like a fringe playoff team, or even Penn State. We'll use Penn State as an example in the Big Ten, like a team that really benefits from the 12-team playoff, right? Like, James Franklin isn't probably going to get fired because now they backdoored their way into the Big Ten championship game because Ohio State lost. And like, he's going to make the playoff now, and it'll be like, oh, this is what Penn State's supposed to be. You're supposed to be like the other Big Ten team that makes the playoffs. So he's not going to lose his job. And again, because his buyout's massive, that's what's going to happen. But yeah, like, I think, like, for Ohio State, it's different. The standard's different. And this year, especially when you paid all that money for this roster, it was supposed to end with more than just a playoff appearance. So that's why I can't do it anymore. Like I understand there's been some context there. I said after the Oregon game, he's got to just start proving it. And then he laid an absolute egg and gave us a big old wet fart on the biggest, most important stage that he ran this team back and built this team for in the first place. Like $20 million on NIL. And this is what you get: 13 or 10 points against Michigan and none in the second half. Like, what is that garbage?
Let me ask you this too, because I think this is going to be an interesting conversation, not just today and after this game, but moving forward too. After a loss like that, and sort of how you got there and how you handled the situation after the game, is there fear of Ryan Day like legitimately losing the locker room and guys sort of just, I don't want to say chalking it up, like you're going to be.
I don't know. It's hard because like guys I talked to who played for him, they like really they go to bat for Ryan Day because he went to bat for them. And so there's he has a way of connecting with his players, and I'll give him that. And that's why he's been such a great recruiter, obviously. But man, like the results aren't there on the field, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. So yeah, I see what you're saying. Maybe there's some of that. We'll have to see. My kind of argument is like if he hasn't lost, like he clearly didn't lose that group of guys enough that they came back for a fourth year. So I'd guess that most of them are still kind of in his corner, and that's, I guess, good news for him.
But not necessarily lose the guys in sense of like, I'm not going to play for this guy anymore. But if that's the play calling you put out against Michigan, and like these guys know, they know what they're strong. So they can look at Jeremiah Smith with 5 catches for 35 yards and be like, that's not enough.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is you've changed everything else, right? New defensive coordinator, new offensive coordinator. You became the CEO coach. You brought in all these different transfers. Like you tried everything and it still hasn't worked. So at some point the finger has to get pointed back at you. And that's kind of what it comes down to. I also think too, and I was texting with our friend Lance Riesland. I don't know if he's watching this, but Lance, we always appreciate you, man. We both kind of said, like, given his response during the fight that happened, he puts what did we hear when we played the clip during the preview episode, Jake? Jim Tressel said you can't treat this game like anything other than a normal game because you live it all year knowing it's a big game. So you don't ramp things up anymore this week leading up to it because you just know. It doesn't have to be said over and over again. And it just feels like Ryan Day, because Michigan's in his head, that he like leans into this game way more than he should. And that puts like the pressure that he feels because he can't beat them, then plays out in the field with his players. And that's a problem too.
Yeah, I think it plays out on the players. I think it plays out in your coaching staff. I think it's from top to bottom. You sort of infect people with that mentality. Yeah. That's like, if you're going to sit there and have that mentality, and I think you do, everybody builds this game up, builds this game up. It's a rivalry. The clocks are on the wall. We all know this. It does seem, though, like he leans extra heavy into this game. And you saw it, like we talked about Will Howard looking incredible the last 2 weeks. And for, I would say, a majority of this season has looked pretty good. The Oregon game, a big game with a really good defense, looked good. Today, he looked a step like slow, almost timid, scared in some sense to make a wrong play, and sort of everything slowed down for him. I think that is sort of the bigger issue. Like everybody is sitting there putting all the pressures, and you probably get sort of like sick to your stomach coming into this game with Ryan Day as your coach. That's what it feels like. He's sitting there and harping on it so heavily and everybody knows your job's riding on it. And it almost feels like he projects that onto the rest of his team. And obviously it's like sort of speculation, but yeah, it feels that way.
Well, and juxtaposed to Ohio State losing the way they did, you had Kyle McCord, the guy that you basically scapegoated as one of the biggest reasons why you lost last year, going 26-36 for 380 yards and 3 touchdowns against Miami, who they basically knocked out of the playoff because they handed him a second ACC loss. And Miami now doesn't go to the ACC championship game, and they're not making the playoff now. Now, I will say Miami's defense is trash. Michigan's is better, but at the same time, take that for what it is. We don't have to go too far down the Kyle McCord rabbit hole, but somebody just put in the comment section, winner today, Kyle McCord, and you would be right. I would not be surprised if Kyle McCord tweets some very cryptic emoji or something like that after the game he played, because he saw that Ohio State lost without him, and clearly I think this does exonerate him to an extent. It clearly wasn't just his fault. It was more on Ryan Day, as we now know. A couple of things I want to hit on before we get out here. We got to do like it, love it, leave it, which I have like a dozen things I could leave. But before we get to that, because you talked about Miami missing the playoff, Ohio State losing, like the implications of what this means for the playoff, I think is kind of interesting because obviously Oregon's your top team. They play Washington. Did that game start yet? I don't even know if it did. I think maybe they play later. No, they did start. They're up 7-0 on Washington right now, late in the first quarter. So, assuming they win that, they're going to go in as they're going to go to the Big Ten championship game undefeated, in line to be the number 1 seed in the playoff. If they win, they will play Penn State. I'm assuming they're going to win that game. And so now Penn State is in the spot that Ohio State was in, which was if you get to the Big Ten championship game, you probably don't get docked for playing an extra game and get like jumped by a team like Notre Dame. So I'm assuming Penn State's going to be your 5 seed no matter what. And so they'll host a game and have like that easier path, quote unquote, to get to the semifinals because they'll be the 5 seed. And so the question kind of becomes like, where does Ohio State fall from here? Some of that might hinge on what happens with Texas and Texas A&M, which that game obviously is going on right now. And it's a big one because they haven't played in like a dozen years. And it's 0-0 right now, early first quarter. So maybe Texas falls out. Winner of the SEC is obviously going to get a bye, but so Miami's now out of the picture. Ohio State is making the playoff. We know that. But how far down they fall because of a loss to this Michigan team remains to be seen. And I guess the one saving grace from today is that we kind of learned this weekend that there is no perfect team. All these teams are pretty beatable. And so maybe that's the path forward for Ohio State is like they can look at the tape and say, well, we can beat this team like this and we can beat this team like that. But I don't know how anybody feels like that's even in the cards at this point for this Ohio State team giving out today win.
Yeah, I don't even know.
Do you think they'll host? Do you think they'll host? Do you think they'll fall far enough to not host a game, or do you think they will? I think they'll let them host a game because it's Ohio State, and the committee's clearly valued them all year enough to keep them at 2, even with the 1 loss. I think this loss was bad, but I don't think it's dropping them out of the top 10, especially when like Indiana is 10th and they beat Indiana. Like they're not going to drop them below Indiana, who's 10. And like, are you going to put like a second ACC team over Ohio State? Probably not. Like how many SEC teams are you going to put over Ohio State? Is Tennessee going to be over them? If Georgia wins, they're going to be in, but like Texas could be over them, I guess, if they win out. But like, I don't know. I think they probably still end up hosting a game, but they're going to be in a less advantageous situation because you're going to get matched up with probably a tougher team.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's kind of tough because you have to be an 8 seed or higher to host. So he would have to drop them below 8. Indiana's an interesting conversation on where they go because Ohio State obviously beat them, but Indiana now has essentially the better schedule, less of the strength of schedule wins. They don't have the quality wins that Ohio State does, but they also have a win over Michigan that Ohio State doesn't have.
Yeah,
I guess it comes down to what the committee values then.
No, that's fair. But head to head still has to matter though. And I still don't think rivalry games can be weird. So I don't think they're going to drop them below Indiana because they beat Indiana head to head and Indiana's strength of schedule stinks. And they beat Indiana pretty soundly head to head too is the other thing. So I don't think they fall that far. But again, it comes down to like second ACC team. I'm assuming that the seeds after the top 4 bye teams are going to be like Penn State at the 5. Notre Dame will probably be slotted in as your 6. And so then you're fighting for the 7 and the 8 seed. So who becomes your 7 and your 8 seed basically off of that? I feel like Ohio State has a good chance to still be in that conversation because I guess it depends on maybe how things go in some of these conference championship games. And that gets the rest of the night tonight. But I don't know. I feel kind of good about them hosting. I don't feel good about them winning, but I feel good about them hosting.
Yeah, because, then there's a conversation of, I think a lot of it plays down to these conference championships because the SEC championship could play heavily into this. Where does Georgia slot in? Where does Texas slot in if they then lose to Georgia? Like they're going to be sort of in that 7-8 range as well.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because then you have 2 2-loss teams, but Ohio State strength of schedule is better, but they have a loss to Michigan that Texas has a win. It's going to get real complicated. It's going to get. Maybe if Texas loses, that's the matchup. Maybe it's Texas and Ohio State in the first round, just based on where they might fall seeding wise, which will be kind of fun. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see what it looks like, but I feel good about them hosting one, but I guess I could obviously be way off on that too.
Yeah, I think conference championships are huge. This is why we have a committee, right? Because there's no way that we actually look at it and be like, well, here are your standings. There are no standings in college football. This is why you have a committee. It's why you have people looking at it. And it sort of comes down into the eyes of, I guess, what the committee feels about this game. And if it was, hey, it's a rivalry game, it's kind of weird, Ryan Day might be in his head about Michigan, and he's going to be fine against other teams. Or is it, that was really ugly, Ohio State looked really bad in that game, and a lot of their weaknesses clearly got exposed.
All right, guys, that brings us to the end of the show. But we won't get out of here without doing what we always do at the end of these post-game editions of Sons of the Shoe, which is, of course, our like it, love it, and leave it from the game. I'll just start. My like it from the game was the nice couple that we met at the bar beforehand who bought us some drinks and gave us some Jello shots. That's my answer, I guess, is that, because I have a love it that's about the game, but there's only really one thing I even loved about the game, and so I'm going to say that's my like it.
Wow, we're at a low bar if that's like it.
Hey, I had a good time. So I liked that I had a good time. It just, the end sucked. But like the experience of being there was awesome. First time I've been to a Ohio State Michigan game in my life. So I enjoyed it.
No, I did. I'm just giving you
I know.
anything I can. I'll make my like it Jeremiah Smith. Not for his performance, but for the fact that I stared at that game, and you can still look at him and say, as long as they start to target him and throw him the ball, he's going to look just fine. I mean, 2 massive DPIs, a touchdown catch in which he absolutely bullied. I don't remember what corner it was, but he bullied him without picking up an OPI, the same OPI that he pretty much picked up on the Oregon game, and then waltzed into the end zone for an easy catch and a touchdown. So if there's one positive takeaway on the offense, I think it's probably Jeremiah Smith. So I guess I can make him my like it.
I can't believe you even found anything on the offense to like. I mean, I guess my backup like would just be Caleb Downs, because once again, I was left. You want to talk about like great players. Yeah, Jeremiah Smith is one, but my goodness, like Caleb Downs, again, another phenomenal game. I mean, the tackle he made at the line of scrimmage to stuff him on 4th down earlier in the game. I mean, that was incredible. By the way, we didn't even talk about the like maybe the most breaking play of the game, which was when Kalel Mullings just like was tackled in the backfield on that last drive, and they had him dead to rights, and then he broke free for 27 yards, and that was when you knew the game was over. That was, I think, around when I texted you and said, yeah, they're going to lose, because you had him in 3rd and 6, you were going to get the ball back, chance to win the game, and then he does that, and it was like that was the one bad play the defense made really the entire day, and it was like, my God, what the hell happened?
Which, by the way, I don't even know that was a bad defensive play. Like, he was wrapped up. He looked like his quads were made out of titanium on that play. Like, he was refusing to go down. I also think there was probably a missed hold on that play that they kind of just let go by on Jack Sawyer. But all in all, I mean, the guy was wrapped up and should have been brought down. So
I'll actually give the rest some credit, though. They let him play, and I appreciate that.
No,
my love it for the game is going to be Jack Sawyer and just the defense as a whole. I thought he played a great game. The interception was awesome. You felt like he had just kind of turned the tide towards Ohio State's favor, and in that moment, and then it just sucks that the offense just put up a complete goose egg, and again, a wet fart of a performance that just left us like, what the hell? You got that from your defense, and they blew it in that way. Like, oh my God. So yeah, I'll say now I'm going on the negative track again, but I'll say I love the defensive performance, and specifically Jack Sawyer.
Yeah, I don't know that we could even have a different love it at this point, because I think that was the only positive we can highlight. I'll go Jack Sawyer, Caleb Downs, and the entire defense too. 2 massive plays, and I'll highlight Jack Sawyer for the end of the whole end of game scuffle, because if there's one guy after that game that can go in and rip away the flag and sort of stand on his morals and be like, you can call it sore loser, but I did my part, it's probably either Caleb Downs or Jack Sawyer. So if somebody's going to do it, I'm glad it was at least him and not I would have had a problem if it was Ryan Day ripping away the flag, to say the least.
Well, he was too busy in I don't know, in some sort of malaise, because he couldn't believe that he lost again. So he was sleeping on the field. He didn't even know what was going on. And that brings
up where his next head coaching job is going to be.
That's exactly what he was thinking about. Like, I wonder if the Bears just fired Eberflus this week. I wonder if I have an opportunity there. We'll see.
That's what he was probably thinking about. That's like right up their alley.
That's what I was going to say. That'd be a perfect hire. Bring back Justin Fields maybe too. Who knows? That brings us to leave it for the game. There's a laundry list of things that we could go through at this point. Can I leave Will Howard? Can I send him back to Kansas State? Because that was one of the worst performances from a quarterback I've seen at Ohio State in a long, long time. And I know we were spoiled by CJ Stroud and others, but that was terrible. Jaden Fielding, can I leave him? Can we leave Ryan Day? Can we leave him on the tarmac at the airport and somebody fly him out of town? I also want to leave this. Fans who aren't wearing shirts in that type of weather, what are you doing? Leave your shirts on. Leave. That's what I'm going to leave. Leave your shirts on, okay? Like, who are you trying to be tough for? Like, Ryan Day trying to prove that Ohio State is tough by running the football as much as they did today. That is the equivalent to the fans that don't wear their shirts at games. Like, who are you trying to prove that you're tough? Okay, we get it. You don't need a shirt. Fine, whatever. You don't need to do it. It's unsafe. It looks uncomfortable. It's just stupid. Like, don't be an idiot. Like, how does David Njoku get away with this on the Browns all the damn time? Like, no, leave your shirts on. That's what I want you to leave. It was so cold today. I had like 4 layers on, and I felt pretty good. And that's the thing. Like, you got to layer up. You got to be a professional about this thing. But like, to show up with no shirt on, not a chance in hell. Even when I was a student and I would show up to like football games like tipsy or drunk, whatever, I wasn't doing that. Like, never in my life. Leave your shirts on, okay?
I was a high school student who was once in a sub-zero game with no shirt on with an M painted on my chest in my high school.
Jake.
Yeah, no, it was stupid. It was not. Let's just say the shower afterwards on my chest. I might
have to leave you off this podcast for moving forward because that's ridiculous. Don't take your shirts off in freezing cold temperatures.
I wouldn't do it again. I wouldn't do it again if that makes you feel any better. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things you could leave. I think you highlighted the good 3. My leave it's going to be something that you wouldn't even have known from this game, Spencer, which is I'm going to leave Gus Johnson. That man is going blind.
I saw somebody tweet that he is like the epitome of awful announcing. So
so I don't even know that he's paying attention to the game or like what is happening, or he's just like lollygagging in his own head like he's on cloud 9. I don't know. There were several times today where he's like, "Oh, we'll have to see if he got it," and he was 5 yards short of the first down. They're like, "Over the middle," and it was a throw to the sideline. And the Will Howard interception, he was like, "It almost picked off." Oh wait, it was picked off. Like, that was the most clear interception of all time. Like,
so what you're telling me is he's become the John Sterling of college football? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. Like, it is downright bad. And I was already sort of one of the people. Like, I know people love Gus. I was sort of one of the people kind of off the.
I used to love Gus, but I've noticed this year has not been as good.
Yeah, I think there's a serious like lack of prep there from a broadcaster standpoint that he doesn't fully go through and sort of just rides off the coattail of getting that big play and getting to scream at the top of his lungs where he, I think, might have damaged his vocal cords on the Jack Sawyer interception. But I can 100% say that I can leave Gus Johnson on this one. Like, that was the worst game I've heard him call.
That's a good answer. I'm just going to throw this up. I know we're an Ohio State podcast, but Valdez Brown has been chirping in the comments. I thought this one was funny. I'm selling keep Ryan Day t-shirts for $13.10. Hey, listen, to the victor goes the spoils. They get to rub it in our face for another year, and they're doing that. I'm sure they do. It's the same way I want to see the Yankees keep Aaron Boone forever because I think that guy's terrible. They're doing the same thing with Ryan Day, so we'll see. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us. We hope that this was at least somewhat therapeutic. I don't know if it was really therapeutic for me. I just yelled the whole time, and I took the floor from Jake, so I apologize, Jake. We will be back next week, middle of the week, with another episode of Sons of the Shoe. I thought we might be previewing a Big Ten championship game, but that's not the case. So we'll have to react to what the playoff looks like, where Ohio State goes from here. We'll lick our wounds. We'll try to reconcile this one. As Ryan Day will try to do the same and think about what his next job is going to be some more. And in the meantime, we hope that you guys will like, follow, subscribe, and review the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Apple, Spotify, the Odyssey app, Apple, if I didn't mention it already. And, of course, at 92 Through the Fans YouTube channel, where you can review, comment, all those things. We appreciate you guys jumping on in with us. And we'll be back again with another episode. Until next time, I'm gonna sound like the crowd when they tried to sing "Hang On, Sloopy." The start of the fourth quarter. It was the saddest rendition of "Hang On, Sloopy" I've ever heard by a fan base. Go Bucks, I guess. Something like that.
Yeah, sure, something like that.